One of my favorite people in the world, Peter Boghossian. Thank you for joining me in the trenches again.
My absolute pleasure. So I keep hearing all this stuff about South Africa. Like, is it as bad as everybody says it is?
No, I don't believe everything you see in the media.
Okay. So let's say that I were just dropped in Joburg. Could I just walk around by myself at night?
Depends where you are in Johannesburg. Also, it's a big city, but I wouldn't really recommend walking alone at night in Johannesburg.
Like, what would happen? Like, you're laughing. What would happen to me? Would someone beat me up? Would they shoot me? Would they?
All right. So the answer is, if you're local, you would probably be streetwise and you would know what to do. You would know the signs and you would know where to be and all that kind of thing. But that's only if you're really in the city center. If you're out in the suburbs, you're probably okay.
So if I were in the city center and I wanted a place to practice my combat training, Joburg would be the place at night.
Yes, that's a good place to be.
Okay, good. Well, I'm trying to turn a negative to a positive.
I've never been asked those questions. But I think you'll agree that crime is generally distributed across the world in sort of city centers anyway.
Yeah. Is there a racial element to those crimes? Like, would I be at an increased risk because I was white?
Race relations in South Africa actually are generally quite good. What you think is pretty bad is generally on the fringe. You, for example, will know all about it. You're from Portland.
Yes, a cesspool if there ever was one. I'm so happy I escaped that lunatic asylum, and I'm really delighted. And, I find myself being a lot less anxious and stressful. And so I'll just give you two quick examples. So the president of Portland State University allowed people to destroy the university at no consequence to the people who did the burning, the pillaging, the looting, the destruction. And she literally just let them go and had the police. I mean, it's a terrible situation. Now, vandals did over $1 million damage to the library with no consequences. And the taxpayers paid that, but I don't give a shit. I don't live there. They can just burn the whole thing down and build it up 100 times over. I couldn't care less. It's that's the people. They've elected certain people, and you're in a democracy and you take responsibility. If that's how the way, we have states' rights here, and if that's the way that the governor of Oregon and the mayor of Portland want to deal with things, that's great. I moved out. You can burn that fucking whole city to the ground. I don't give a shit. I mean, I don't know how it is in South Africa, but if you don't like something, you just move to another state.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that too.
That's why people have fled blue cities in blue states to California. They fled California. They're leaving Portland. They're going to Florida and Texas.
But I mean, Peter, the point that I was making is that the whole BLM thing was fringe. It wasn't in the main.
What do you mean? You mean the number of people who believed it?
Yes.
Yeah, I just read Andrew Doyle's new book. And I can't remember the name. I sent me the manuscript. I can't remember the name of the group, but it was estimated that only 8%, and I've seen this figure bandied about quite a bit, only 8% of the people were true believers or true adherents to the ideology. The problem is, I mean, that could very well be true, but the problem is when you create a culture of fear, you have no idea what anybody believes because it's just falsification. They're going to tell you what they want you to think, and you're going to walk around and see BLM signs and people's. I mean, that movement was what a disgrace. What a disgrace. And I had spoken out about it, and people went crazy on me. The leaders were corrupt. They bought mansions, and what nobody talks about is how the murder rate of young black men skyrocketed after that. And I wrote about think it was on Twitter or Substack, something, that was an inevitable consequence of kind of, what the Ferguson effect is? When you stop policing areas, oversimplified, but when you stop policing areas, crime rates go up in those areas, particularly black areas. Not guys like middle-class white men like me. I'm largely unaffected.
Okay, so you and I have spoken plenty over the last few years, Peter, but for my UK column audience who might not know who you are, quickly go.
Fools!
What is your background?
What is my background? Education and philosophy, and that's pretty much it. I don't even know how to answer that question. Sometimes people ask me what I do. I don't even know what to say when I do. Education, I say.
Well, you've got two great moments. All right. You published a book that dramatically influenced my life for all the right reasons. And you were involved in a fantastic peer review based prank.
Yeah, we did the Grievance Studies Affair, which is takeoff of Sokol. And I was in the New Atheist movement. My first book was a manual for creating atheists. Second book, I've written a ton of popular pieces and peer-reviewed pieces, and I give lectures. I do this thing called Spectrum Street Epistemology, where we go around the world. We do it in schools. We're going to be doing it in prisons, and we're going to be doing it in, with the Maori in New Zealand, and hopefully in prisons all around the world. So we help people speak across divides and then clean up the way they think about things. And I did that, and I published a crazy letter of recommendation that I went viral beyond anything I ever expected. And I just do scientific skepticism, critical thinking. I fight irrationality in all of its forms. At least I do my best to do that. And I have a small nonprofit. I'm affiliated with the University of Austin and as a founding faculty fellow. So I'm busy. I'm in Budapest right now, Hungary. I love it here.
Yeah. So you and I met, we quote unquote met in 2019, and that was because of your book How to Have Impossible Conversations, which is I consider that one of my Bibles. So I've got like maybe 2 or 3 books that I will always keep with me. In the year 2025, why do we need a book like that?
Boy, it seems more pertinent now than ever. The authoritarian and illiberal forces are on the decline. And so we need a certain type of criticism. Don't get me wrong. I'm deeply involved in all kinds of criticism. I think criticism is necessary, but you can't just criticize. You have to build, you have to make, you have to offer people. And that's what we do. We were just at Vertex Partnership Academies in the Bronx, and it's a predominantly African-American school. And we did Spectrum Street Epistemology, which is basically a way to help people speak across divides and make their ideas clear. So again, I'm not criticizing criticism. We need criticism, but there has to be a point where you build and you make and you contribute. And so How to Have Impossible Conversations is a contribution to that effort of how to teach people to speak across divides or in their deep chasms, deep gulfs in belief, political, religious, ideological.
Oh, but why though?
Well, if you don't do that, you end up like Iraq. If you don't do that, you end up like a kind of war-torn country or a place where people go to violence. So either settle your differences through dialogue or you settle them through bloodshed. And so people have to be given that opportunity. The problem is that they have all the wrong things modeled for them right now. They don't have the right way to have those conversations. And, you just said you're a father before, and that's an amazing thing. And I subjected my kids, and I say subjected on purpose, to really, countless days and nights of Socratic examination over the dinner table, where I'd invite people in the house. Don't bring Muhammad to the mountain. Bring the mountain to Muhammad. So I'd bring my friends. I would bring public intellectuals. I'd bring professors, etc., and make my kids sit through those meals and turn those into kind of some lovely Socratic evenings. And I think that's the recipe for how to live a better life. how to think more thoughtfully about what you believe and engage other people. It lends to a rich life too, and rich friendships.
Well, that's exactly what I experienced from your work. One of the things that I remember the most is, why do you believe what you believe?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an ancient question, and most people don't know how to ask it. They don't know how to listen. They don't know how to ask the right follow-up questions. The older I get, the more I'm convinced that, and people have written whole entire books about this, the problem comes from listening. And people think that they're listening, but they're not listening. And it's very, very difficult to convince. I call it a reflexive problem. It's a problem that the very nature of the problem prevents it from being solved. For example, if someone is defensive and you say to them, well, you're being defensive, well, their defensiveness will prevent them from solving the problem of their defensiveness.
So you don't get anywhere.
Yeah, you don't get anywhere. And so we have to, if you ever, I went to a relationship counselor once. I think it was a complete catastrophe, but she's one of the things that she didn't like me very much. I asked too many questions for her, I think. But one of the things that she said that she kind of parroted back a lot of these banal talking points is that, but it's also 100% correct, is that you have to. You can't expect someone else to change. You have to change, right? So you just can't expect that the other person is going to do something or be something. You have to model the behavior you want to see. And when I go to prisons, again, we're going to be going to prisons again pretty soon. That's one of the key ideas. It's a modeling behavior.
What do you hope to achieve, though, by going to prisons?
That's a great question. In a sense, the same thing I hope to achieve by going to schools with vulnerable populations, in that there are these low to no costs. And again, I incur all the costs. I just want to be crystal clear. Not only do I not make money from this actually costs me money. So we buy them the mats, the Spectrum Street Epistemology mats. I pay for my own hotel. I pay for my own airfare. I pay for everybody's stuff. So this is the opposite of a get rich quick scheme. This is a get poor fast scheme. But I do it because I believe in it. And what I believe in is that there are low to no cost ways to help people think more clearly, to help people engage ideas, to help people desist from violence and crime, to help people civilly communicate with each other. And it doesn't take much. It takes actually very, very little to nudge people toward. Everybody has the possibility of leading a better life. They just need the tools, and they're having the exact opposite things modeled for them. I almost never see any, TV shows where people have these really thoughtful dialogues, or the universities have been an abject, unmitigated catastrophe for that. They're making people more fragile and more vulnerable, telling them they're victims, and they need coloring books and cookies and balloons and stuffed dolls and all of the exaggerated caricatures that you have heard, most of which are true at major universities. So the universities have failed us. They're not modeling it. They're not. So who's going to do it? I mean, how are we going to do it? So that's the other thing that most people don't understand. They think, oh, well, who cares about prison inmates? Well, you should, because they get released into the community. Now, maybe you could make that argument that we shouldn't put in financial investments into prisoners who won't be released into the community, like lifers or something. Okay, well, we can have that conversation. But most people are not in prison for life. The statistics, it depends on where you go and what they've incarcerated for, but they'll be your neighbors. There'll be employees where you live and work. So it doesn't take much to help these guys. And I say guys because I mostly work with violent men to live better lives.
You alluded to the Socratic method earlier, and Socrates lived thousands of years ago. I'm getting the impression that this is an ongoing battle.
Yeah, it's a never-ending battle. Once you grind down some irrationality, another one pops up. Once you grind down some fad, but it's really interesting. It's really interesting, if I may. If you look at Mensa in the 70s, the high IQ society, I can't remember the statistics, but the majority of people believe in things like telepathy and remote viewing and clairaudience and clairvoyance. Those statistics have been published. So every decade or so, we have fads for what people believe. I had an interesting conversation with Mia Hughes, the Canadian, I think she's based in Ottawa, researcher about gender issues, and she was telling me that bulimia was a trend among young girls, then cutting was a trend, and now trans is a trend. And so these things they're just social contagions. Of course, this most recent social contagion is orders of magnitude. I mean, almost infinitely worse. That's a misuse of the word. But so, once you stomp one out, some other derangement syndrome comes back. So we have to kind of look at it like a prophylactic. How do we give people the tools to protect against dangerous, harmful pseudoscience and nonsense? I mean, trans is probably the deranged idea of them all.
Yes, but Peter, the point that I was making is that if this was being spoken about, thousands of years ago with the Greeks,
yeah,
and you and I are speaking about it now, I mean, this is a forever war.
Correct. That's the substitution hypothesis. The substitution hypothesis, I don't know if I coined that or who coined that, but it's either me or Peterson. I can never remember. But the substitution hypothesis is basically the idea that once you stomp out one irrationality, another one takes its place. So there's a kind of homeostasis among irrationalities. And so the norm is that people believe crazy shit, just weird, bizarre. Now there are different schools of thought on this. One school is that we need to accept that this is human nature and nudge them into benign delusions, benign forms of Christianity, for example. Another belief is, no, we have to kind of extirpate it from the soil of belief entirely and just uproot all of it. I tend toward that camp, but it would be naive to say that, I mean, you're correct. We've been laboring under various delusions for a long time. I will say that I will concede that certain delusions are far more pernicious than others, and Western Europe is seeing the effect of some of those delusions of citizens now.
But I mean, I think it's Nassim Taleb who made the argument that if you just remove, for example, religion from society, society will just collapse.
Well, that's historically, that's just demonstrably false. They've done that in Scandinavia. Scandinavia hasn't collapsed. If anything, it's the injection of Islam into those societies that's causing the community to go on shaky ground. So, I mean, that just seems completely false. Unless you want to argue that there's some kind of historicity, or it's ahistorical.
No, I think...
No,
sorry. I think what Taleb is arguing that it's human nature to form a belief in something. It's that Lord of the Flies scenario where you will always create meaning and purpose.
Yeah, and so that's the question. Do we nudge people to more benign delusions? More benign forms of Christianity, love everybody, some guy walked on water. Therefore, he had these metaphysical truths, so therefore his ethical truth must be the case, turn the other cheek, etc. Or, because if we don't do that, people go to crazy town. I mean, I think, that's the question with the new atheist movement. And that's, I think, why a lot of people are, one of the many reasons many people are upset with me, because new atheists were so successful. I think, Melissa Chen tweeted out something I told her at a party once, and that was, it's better to believe that a man walked on water once than it is to believe that all men can get pregnant.
How do you arrive at that point, Peter, where you think that a man can have a baby? What happened? I mean, what must happen?
Yeah, well, that's actually an easy question to answer. Your moral mind overrode your rational mind. So you think good people, I believe I'm a good person, good people believe this, therefore I should believe this.
Right.
There's no sane person could ever believe that. There's a great meme, just if you can put it in post-production, would be great, of like, the meme of the bus going down and then it hits another bus. And it's something like, new atheism or Christianity, everyone's going to be rational and sane. And then the bus that hits it like pregnant men, and the whole the train derails. So that's the problem. The problem is that, is irrationality just the default? Because it's a tremendous amount of work to stay sane. It just, especially with social media. I've made that mistake before of not listening. I made it a lot before. But I had a conversation, I don't know, like less than a year ago, maybe, I don't know, but with Jonathan Préjus. He's the super Christian dude. I really like him. I met him in London, hung out. We had a great time, a few drinks together, good dude. But I could not possibly give you an example of someone who has beliefs, particularly metaphysical beliefs, that I find, well, I'm not going to be pejorative about it, but suffices to say, considerably different from my own. But he was very kind, and he invited me on the show, which is infinitely more than I can say for the people I've been trying to have a conversation with, which I want to talk to you on in a second. And it was a really interesting conversation. I got more emails about that conversation than I did from almost anything except my second Rogan and my Hard Talk interview. I was stunned at how many people emailed me about that interview. But I wanted to, throw something out. I've been really trying to have, and I'm going to admit pretty soon on Twitter that I was wrong about something. I think it's important when you move in the public space and you make a mistake to say you're wrong. And I was wrong about this. I thought it'd be far easier to get an Islamist on the show than a leftist. I've been reaching out to tons of Islamists. I can't get anybody to talk to me. They have to have somewhat of a platform, and they can't be just a random dude off the street. Preferably they have an academic position or something. I can't get anybody to talk to me.
That's weird.
Yeah, I'm very surprised by that. And I was wrong to think that would be the case.
Why, though?
Well, that's the question. I don't know. I mean, in terms of, I got a tremendous amount of shit for having Destiny. I did, I think, 3 or 4 events.
I have to go and listen to that.
I got a tremendous amount of shit. I mean, I like the guy. I get along great with the guy, but people lost their minds about that. Whatever you want to say about him or his beliefs, let me tell you something in no uncertain terms. He will talk to anybody. He will talk to people. That alone, just that one quality makes him light years, legions above his, I don't even know what you want to say, his fellow leftists, although he is not an identitarian, and that could be why.
But that's an important thing, though, the ability to talk to anybody. This is a trend that I've noticed in the last, well, at least since I've been doing this sort of thing, that there are people who simply do not want to be associated with you because they don't like some of your views. And they use terms like, well, we're not going to platform that person or whatever. But I mean, that in itself falls into wokeness.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've also been thinking about this. There's a lot of criticism about this, quote unquote. I was just asking, I can't see my own fingers. I was just asking questions thing. I understand how some people, that could rub people the wrong way. But I also think that something, it's really important to ask questions. I mean, and I understand that some people ask questions with an agenda. I actually published a piece about that, but that's...
And they'll try and set you up.
Yeah, and I actually have no problem with that. I mean, you remember that guy who Peter Hotez, who...
Yes, I remember him.
Yeah.
He was on Rogan, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he refused to have a debate with somebody. Okay, so if he did not move in the public space, that's totally reasonable. 100% reasonable. It's totally reasonable to not expect a scientist will go on a major podcast if they've never done it before, and if they just want to do science. But he didn't. He already moved in the public space, and he made some claims that affected public policy and public health, and he was wrong not to do so.
Yeah.
So and I do think that's why I told you about the Islamists. Like, I don't, or like some say, well, I'm a leftist, have me on. No. So you have to have, look, if you just have a random person on the street, right? And there is some legitimacy to like, why are you platforming this guy? But if somebody is, they're a professor, they have, a high H index, they've published multiple books on the subject, they have peer review, they have popular pieces, maybe they have a semi-successful podcast, etc. I think that's fine. That's the kind of person you want to hear from because they have some expertise. They've demonstrable expertise in a subject area. So, I got a tremendous amount of shit because I had Mark Sargent come speak to my class. He's the guy.
Yes, I've spoken to him too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got a tremendous amount of shit for that, but I stand by that decision 100%. I read his book. I stand by that because it was a science and pseudoscience class. If it were like, the history of Aristotle or something, that would have been inappropriate. But
I mean, so what? I mean, at the end of the day, Peter, so what? The guy's got a different opinion. So what?
Yeah. So don't you want to teach kids how to ask better questions?
Yes.
Don't you want to teach kids that you live in a world in which people have beliefs, some of which are very bizarre, and you will encounter those, and you're going to need to know how to navigate that reality? I mean, of course you do. And it's people say, well, the science is settled. Well, no shit, the fucking science is settled, Sherlock. I mean, but that's not the point that the science is settled. So there's just that general. Anyway, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say that, over the last few years, I mean, I've done over 1,000 interviews, and I found that some of the best conversations I ever had were with people that I had diametrically different
100%.
views, like a communist.
100%.
I never thought in my life that I would have so many agreements with a self-declared communist.
100%. Yeah. And the other thing is the audience, it will get you clicks and views, et cetera. And there's nothing wrong with that. People have said to me like, well, why don't you have, so I go around, I used to go to parks all the time. I try not to do that anymore. Now we try to have experts. The thing I can't control, I speak to people all over the world, literally Taiwan, just all over the world. Budapest, I'm doing here. I can't control the people who volunteer.
Yeah.
Like nobody I do this with, nobody's acting. They may be, and one guy said that once and he's like, well, I'm an actor. Yeah, but I'm not paying you to act here. You're telling me what you believe. So there are no actors in what I do. So the thing is you only know the beliefs of the people who come up. You don't know the beliefs of the people who don't. And the problem with that is the people who will come up by and large are not older. Older people are camera shy. So you can't really, it's very difficult to get those people to have conversations on camera. Off camera is pretty easy.
You also learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah, totally. What you believe, I made a mistake. It takes a lot to be neutral, especially when people say really stupid shit. But you have to be neutral when you do this, or else if you're not neutral, it doesn't work, right? The street epistemology stuff doesn't work. People are extraordinarily good at sniffing out an agenda, and once they sniff out an agenda, it invokes a defensive posture. Once the defensive posture is invoked, it compromises the whole project. But so I had been doing 4 or 5 of these, and then I was the subject in one of them, and I was a dick, and I was just really, I apologized and I said I wouldn't release the video, but you do what you can do, but you do learn about yourself, and everybody has their own. I have my own breaking point. I can only listen to nonsense for so long. I have about 3 hours of listening to total nonsense. But that's the other thing. It's hard. So it's like when you're in a conversation with one person, if someone says something ridiculous, you can kind of junk it. But if you're doing spectrum street epistemology and there are, 6 or 7 people or even 3 people, and they're each giving different reasons with different objections, you have to hold all of those in your head. I notice every time I do that, when I come home at night, I sleep like a rock. It's an incredible amount of intellectual exercise to keep bad ideas resident in your head.
But you said it's difficult to be neutral. So my question to you is, why do you want to be neutral? Why is it important to be neutral?
You can't moderate or mediate or facilitate a discourse among people who disagree if you take a side.
Okay. Oh, I see.
You have to be.
No, okay.
I have Yeah, I mean, I obviously have my own beliefs about lots of stuff that I've formulated over the years, but that you have to do your best not to come to. Reed Nicewater, to travel around with him, he did one of the best ones we've ever done. He facilitated. It was on surrogacy, and it was in Budapest, and it was just a masterful example of how to have conversations across dialogues, across divides. One thing we've noticed from the comments that we've listened to people is people like it not when you have random people off the streets, but when you have experts. So when we have experts who disagree, those conversations are super interesting. So did you see the debate between Sean Carroll and Eric Weinstein?
No.
Piers Morgan? No. It was really interesting. It was, and I don't know if you get the reference, you might be too young. I'm the Sergeant Schultz of like physics. Like I know nothing about physics, like just not, and these guys are just like way hyper educated about math and math PhDs from Harvard, and not that Harvard means anything anymore. It used to, but, well, if you haven't seen it, the reference will be lost. But I do think that there's a way to engage with people to increase the likelihood of certain outcomes. And so one thing is that I always advocate is Rappaport's rules, listening, repeating back to somebody to make sure you know what they mean. That's probably one of the most important things in all conversation. Not attacking somebody personally is vital. You saw that with the Dave Murray and
Yes.
Douglas Murray and Dave Smith. Yeah. And, Smith was kind of making some personal attacks there, but you've seen lots of examples. I think it was Toynbee who said there are many ways for a family to be dysfunctional, few to be functional. There are many ways for a conversation to go wrong, very few for a conversation to go right. And you have to be the one who's unfazed in that conversation. And usually people expose themselves more than you ever could.
Yeah, I mean, in your book, you talk about the importance of rapport, and it's something that seems to be lost in the social media generation. I think Jordan Peterson actually, I mean, he's gone off the rails in many ways, but he did say some pertinent things a few years ago, and one of them being he thinks that social media has increased, the sort of sociopathic tendency of people. I think he's right. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Peterson has made indelible contributions, particularly to young men and others, and I do think he's right. Did you see the trigonometry episode with my buddies Constantine and Francis with the crazy feminist?
I've seen a few of them. They were on my show also, but I'm not quite sure which one you're referring to.
Yeah, they're super good guys. And again, hats off to her, because almost no one who has her beliefs will go on any podcast and speak to people.
I don't think I saw it.
It's really interesting because it gets to rapport, and it just yet another example of two smart, sincere people dealing with somebody who is not used to having somebody ask them difficult questions. So that's the thing that people really have, and that's what you should do with your kid. Set these demarcated times where we're going to have people over and we're going to ask tough questions and we're going to model that. It's not something that's explicit, but if you go long enough, I don't know if you saw the Jubilee recently with Peterson, and they changed the title from, was it 25 people or something versus one Christian or something, whatever it is. It
was a disaster.
It wasn't particularly good, but it is an indispensable intellectual virtue to know how to field very complex, very difficult ideas and scale up. A buddy of mine was telling me a few years ago, somebody said to me, and this has haunted me, Germ, so I hope it's false, but this is an example of something I'm trying to convince myself that's false, and I'm almost sure it's true. The less intelligent you are, the less possible it is that you can entertain a hypothetical. And a buddy of mine was telling me that's one of the things that he asks a woman when he's on a date. He just told me this like 2 nights ago. He said, he'll ask the question, well, what would happen if you didn't have breakfast today? And if she says, well, I did have breakfast today. He said, well, what would happen if you didn't? Then if she can't entertain a hypothetical about that, it's kind of a litmus test. somebody was recently telling me that his boyfriend, he didn't know, his boyfriend didn't give him what he needed intellectually. And he's trying to navigate that because his boyfriend was incredibly kind to him when he got sick. And I told him that when I was younger, I think I don't profess by any stretch of the imagination to be an expert in gay relationships. I could have made a joke about me being an expert in lesbian relationships, but I won't make that joke. You know, when you're younger, you know, and you're heterosexual, at least you're looking for, you know, someone to be the mother of your children. You're looking for a kind of different set of a different suite of attributes. A buddy of mine only dated women who didn't wear eyeglasses because he believed it was kind of good genetic stock. But I think as you get older, I just, that means like very little to me, you know, and maybe because that my whole life is surrounded by, you know, I'm here at the Danube Institute. I'm just surrounded by think tank people and constantly talking to literally some of the world's smartest people in the Anglosphere. So it doesn't mean it just, I guess it's, you know, how do you balance kindness and compassion in a relationship with somebody who is, you know, thoughtful, or maybe I don't really like the term intellectual, but, you know, an intellectual, or has, you know, reads and thinks about things. I don't necessarily think there's a right answer to that question, but as I get older, I value kindness more and more.
Yeah, but you brought up wearing glasses.
Yeah, the idea is if you wear glasses, I'm not saying this is true, I'm saying this is what he said. The idea is if you wear glasses, when he was dating, he was looking for a woman to have kids with. And he thought she'd be better genetic stock if she didn't wear glasses.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So
I think the hypothetical of what would happen if you didn't have breakfast, and if she says, I had breakfast, he just gets rid of her immediately. I think that's fascinating.
But that is very fascinating. I was in China last year, and every third person wears glasses, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, I don't know, an artifact of insane pollution or the dismantling of the regulatory apparatus. I have no idea. Or maybe more people wear glasses here, but you don't know because they wear contact lenses. Or I've actually met people who wear glasses with fake lenses because they think it makes them look intelligent. So who knows? Or maybe they study so much by the dim light or something. I met a was a buddy of mine who recruited people from Intel, and he was telling me about a guy in China who had this indelible mark in his forehead because he fell asleep on the candle over and over because they didn't have enough money for electricity. Yeah.
But I mean,
how we went on that road.
The moral of the story here is that what you're actually alluding to is that this is about the art of asking questions, the art of listening, the art of creating rapport, ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's about it is about figuring out what you want, but it's about figuring out if what you want is what you should want. Because we want things that are often not in our best interest, or not what we should want.
Why?
We have different starting information. We're imperfect beings. Lots of reasons.
Also, I mean, the title of your book is How to Have Impossible Conversations. Why impossible?
Because many people think those conversations are impossible. You know, another guy who will have a conversation with you if he disagrees with you. And there are not many of these people on the left at all. I think there's like maybe two, maybe three, I should say. I'm thinking of someone else, but it was David Pack.
Oh, yeah, and Destiny.
And yeah, that's about it. And maybe a couple of other people.
P.S. Morgan.
Who?
P.S. Morgan.
Oh, yeah, he will. I haven't spoken to him, but I had David Packman on, and it was a perfectly fine conversation. We agreed and we disagreed, and you know, a lot of people said, "Oh, he moderated or he mediated what he said." I don't know, maybe, I don't know, but there is people think those conversations are impossible. They're not. I mean, they're really not. That's why it's so disturbing to me. If anybody watches the stuff I do, I never really attack anybody. I never go for anybody's jugular. I never really. I just ask hard questions, and they're not even that hard, really. But they're just questions to help me. I only ask a question. My golden rule is I only ask a question if I genuinely want to know the answer, and so I'll ask questions to help me figure something out. And so you would think if you're an Islamist, and then I'll say one more thing. You would think if you're an Islamist, this would be an incredible opportunity to share your message with the world. And if you really believe that you are correct, then it should be effortless for you to feel difficult conversations. The reason I think many leftists initially didn't have conversations is because they controlled the main institutions and they basically won already. So if you won already, you don't want to take any risks. Like presidential debates, if you're losing and if you think if you're down in the polls, you want to ask for as many debates as you can. If you're winning, you don't want to have any. And if you're really far ahead, you definitely don't want to have any because you don't want to risk your chance. Now that woke has gone into hospice, I for a while I thought, well, geez, maybe these people have conversations, but I think it's too late. They've already been damaged. Their thinking is damaged. They've lived in these echo chambers where they've made a virtue of not having conversations with people. And now I think they're incapable of even basic rudimentary thought. I think they have like simian recognition of things like, ugh, food or what have you, but I don't think that they're capable of entertaining. Not only do I not think that they're incapable, not only do I not think that they're capable of defending their beliefs, but I think that if you live that way long enough, all of your belief apparatus becomes damaged and you start to not think clearly about other things, even if you attempted to maintain a dialectic in those other arenas.
Well, what matters more, changing your own views or changing the views of somebody else?
In the Gorgias, Plato says it's better to be refuted than it is to refute. That's clearly true. It's clearly true to correct a mistaken perception that you have about the world. I mean, I don't know why. I think the reason people don't want to do that is because they have this idea of saving face. In the hostage negotiation literature, they talk a lot about that. The hostage negotiators always give, and the best guys, the best people are the best at this, give people an opportunity to save face, to not look bad. But I think it actually makes you look good if you say, hey, I thought this before I had this piece of information, but now I don't. I think that's just part of the human condition. Our ego is overriding certain considerations. So we think, we think we're going to gain status in our tribe. But if that's your tribe, man, your tribe is fucked up. I'd say escape that tribe.
But why do we find it so important then, Peter, to change the minds of other people?
I think it's a kind of way to reinforce what we already believe. Like, I'm having a little doubt. I'm unsure. So if these people, they'll agree with me, they'll make me feel better about myself. I think ultimately it comes down to morality. People want to be viewed and seen as good people, and they want to think of themselves as good people. And so, I mean, Pinker talks about that. People don't do bad. Among other places. People don't do bad things because they're bad people, whatever that means. They do it because they kind of want to be good people. You don't start throwing Jews in ovens because you say, I'm going to wake up and be a bad person today. You do that because you think that's a good thing to do. So you think you're acting morally. I mean, you're grossly mistaken, obviously, but it's not, no one wakes up and virtually no one's like, yes, I'm going to be a horrible human being today and inflicts, the maximum amount of suffering. They think they either other people and look at them as not humans, like, Jews as not humans or what have you. Or they have other kind of accoutrements of belief. People look for these adversarial relationships. Some people even thrive off of them. And I will admit, I'm personally incredibly comfortable in an adversarial situation when people are threatening me physically or verbally. I just find it's my happy place. I go to a place of great comfort. I don't know why it is. I can't really answer that. But the idea is, as a general rule, it's pretty easy to diffuse those situations. And I have, 8 or 10 videos online showing of people freaking out at me and keeping my cool. That's the one thing people always ask me is like, how do you, I was in New York last week and two people on the same day ran into me in the street and said, how do you keep your cool in those situations? It's actually super easy to keep your cool. It's just, you just have to ask yourself, like you have to ask yourself and sincerely want to, if you sincerely want to know the answer to this question, you should never be, you won't lose your cool. Why does somebody believe that? Like what causes someone to believe that? And once you center that question in your mind, then every subsequent question is oriented to figuring out why someone believes that. And once you figure out why they believe, you can figure out why they're upset. And once you figure out why they're upset, it's very easy to diffuse, not universally, but almost universally, whatever it is they believe.
So then, Peter, why do you, Peter Boghossian, believe what you believe?
Well, I mean, I could certainly be mistaken. I believe what I believe because I think I have sufficient evidence. I think I've thought about many, but certainly not most of my beliefs. But I think I have I don't want to say a safety valve, but I always say to myself, okay, so I'm willing to change my mind about something. And the moment that you have that undergirding all of your thoughts, it's like a safety mechanism that prevents you from lapsing into, basically becoming an ideologue. I had a guy in my class many years ago. He said, I'm willing to question anything except my religion. And I found that to be fascinating. It's like, or I often find people to be fascinating. I often find it to be fascinating when religious people say, oh, it's a religion. So they can see that somebody else's belief is a religion and that's bad, but they can't take the same tool and turn it on their religious belief. So I think as long as you're willing to reconsider what it is you believe, it's kind of a safety mechanism to prevent you from becoming an ideologue. But then again, we don't teach that in schools. Like that's not valued in our educational process. Revise your belief. Well, find me someone who I was at Dartmouth recently. Sorry to interrupt. And then I asked this kid how he could be wrong about something. He was a junior. And he said, wow, no one's ever asked me that. And I was like, really? You're at an Ivy League school. Nobody is, and I shouldn't, Dartmouth is probably the best of the Ivies. I realize that's not saying much. I don't mean that to be an underhanded compliment, but Dartmouth is a great school, unlike the other Ivies. And I couldn't believe that no one said to this kid in 3 years of education, oh, how could that belief be wrong? I mean, the whole system should be this geared up to this kind of Popperian falsification of merciless falsification of every fucking thing you believe. But this kid didn't even get the question once.
But compartmentalization of ideas doesn't make you necessarily a stupid person. I mean, you can be the best dentist in the world and you might believe something that seems ludicrous.
Sure. And ideally what we should do is, you asked the question before about belief, but if someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer to the question, I say I don't know. I don't pretend to know something I don't know. And so we've created these cultures in which, particularly in universities, James Randi used to say when someone gets a PhD, they never say, he was the famous skeptic who died a few years ago. They never say, I don't know anymore. And so that should always be a virtue to say, I don't know. It's never a bad thing. I mean, you never see that in high competency or skill-based things. You never see people in jiu-jitsu, for example, I was at a jiu-jitsu seminar and I asked this guy something. He said, geez, I don't know. He's a 4th degree black belt. This guy was not a man to be trifled with, an extraordinarily dangerous human being. And I so respected him for saying that. Usually in high competence areas, that's what you'll find.
I live on the African continent and the people around me, by and large, without being degrading, are fairly simple people and are very spiritual people, very tribal, thousands of years of belief and all that sort of thing. Yet they are very happy and fulfilled. Now, if I go to Europe, which I was recently in, I see a lot of empty people, but supposedly intelligent, deeply thoughtful people. What's going on there?
Oh boy, that's a huge question. That is a massive question. So I'm not necessarily buying the explanation. I said not necessarily. I could buy it to a certain extent that certain cultures are just more thoughtful as a general rule than others. I know people are going to cringe when they hear that. I could give data on that, but this type of person who would cringe at that is not interested in data. They're interested in being right and attacking someone for a belief because they think it makes them moral. So there's no point in giving data. So I'm not. Look, if you had an idea in an ideal world and you could wave a wand, what would you make it? Would you make people thoughtful and happy? Part of the response to that would be, if you're genuinely thoughtful, it's difficult to believe you could be truly happy. So the ancient question is better to be a Socrates dissatisfied or a pig satisfied. And so there is a certain a degree of leading a thoughtful and examined life that makes someone inherently unhappy.
Let me jump in there and ask it. I've just come up with a better way of asking it.
Yeah.
Is a Bushman poor?
Depends what you mean by poor. Look, so again, that's why the conversation is complicated. So in the United States, I'm completely convinced that we're heading to bankruptcy right now. We passed this bill. I've been tweeting about it incessantly. No one gives a fuck. People don't care. We're literally the end of the empire, which is I usually don't talk about this, but I'm now a Bitcoin. I'm super bullish on Bitcoin because I don't think we can save ourselves. Our empire is over. And I think Doge offers us a glimmer of hope. But when you ask most Americans, they don't give a fuck. They couldn't care less. They truly don't care less. Even if they're just laying on a beach, they still don't care. Business people don't care. They will care pretty soon. They'll care big time. And then they'll be pissed off because no one ever warned them. But they don't. So there is a kind of cultivated apathy and happiness. There's a kind of being happy at not knowing. It's the whole Adam and Eve problem. I don't think it's possible. I could be completely wrong about this, and the way to know if I'm wrong is it's an empirical question. Can you find a society that's like super simple and super happy, where everybody's like, the one you live in, they're just dancing around and everything, and they've developed technologies to ameliorate suffering? Have they developed dental technologies? Probably not. Okay, but they have no problem taking dental technologies from the people who you perceive as miserable. Okay, so maybe they're the smarter ones after all. I mean, that's the other thing. Western Europe is completely fucked. I mean, it's over. It's totally over. Their empire is over.
I mean, I was in Amsterdam, Peter. I was in Amsterdam not too long ago, and I just saw individuals walking around with headphones on, looking at their cell phones, completely disconnected from reality.
It doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I would argue it's better than causing mayhem and pandemonium. It's better to be neutral and indifferent in a society than to be lecherous. Yeah, Western Europe is toast. England's UK is toast. The United States is toast, and all these places are toast of their own making.
You need to come to my continent, particularly to the south, and come experience some Africanization.
I don't know if I'm a fan of that. I'm really a fan of the first world. No.
You need hair on your arms.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, two people offered me some guy wanted to send me on his boat in South Africa, but I politely declined. I have no desire to go to South Africa whatsoever, in spite of wanting to see you and your wife and your son, because we've never met in person. But, I don't know, maybe. I mean, I can't imagine it. My buddy has a jiu-jitsu studio out there, so who knows?
Ultimately, your argument fundamentally is that to solve things around us, you need to start by talking. And by talking, not talking at, but by talking with.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say talking. I'd say just listening. Trying to figure things out, So the people who seem miserable, just, hey, I would just say, I'm a big fan of being forthright. You have to be forthright in the right way. But hey, I'm from South Africa, and people around me are singing and dancing, and they're all happy, and they're not the sharpest tools in the drawer. They're a simple bunch, but they seem super happy, and they're living their best lives. And I come up here, and you people seem thoughtful, but fucking miserable. What's up with that? Most people, if you say it exactly like that, in the right context, will think about it, and they'll give you an honest answer. Very few people, it always amazes me. I ask people all around the world the most intimate, crazy, intense questions, like about eating their friends if they were stranded on an island. I mean, just, cannibalism, like the craziest shit. And almost never do I have someone say, one time I had someone say, what kind of question is that? And then even she answered it. Like almost always when you ask someone a question and you're sincere, people will answer the question. Almost always. Even if it's a stupid, some people would say, God, that's a stupid question, but that's on them. And almost always they still answer the question.
So what's the moral? Yeah, what's the moral of the story?
Well, I think there's like an Achilles heel in our cognitive architecture. When you're asked a question, people answer it. I don't know, it's just really weird. And I think now, even more so, I'm amazed at the kind of things that people tell me. Like, totally amazing. Guys telling me he's like, and have sex with his brother. And I mean, I'm just amazed the kind of shit that people tell me, like literally on a regular basis, the things and it's not even a confession. It's just that, we did the street epistemology, and this guy's telling me he gets off to this kind of porn and all this stuff. And this other guy's telling me about his erections. Like, so they're like all of the taboos that we used to be in place, particularly about sexual things, they don't seem to hold anymore. So, I think that the deliverable is when you're in doubt, if like you're having a difficult conversation and you're in doubt, assuming you have some kind of rapport, just revert to asking questions. If you're ever stressed or stuck, or just ask questions. It's just, and if you watch the confrontation video at PSU, that's what I did. And if you're surrounded by people, I always do this. I try to single one person out and then ask them questions. That's a technique from the literature as well. But impossible conversations are really, they're almost never, I don't think I've had a single one that's been impossible. There's also a way, I don't really write about this because it's a difficult thing to write about. I wrote about it a little bit in the book, but of just a way to pause after you ask a question. So don't fill in the lacuna, don't fill in that little gap, just wait. And that's a period where people can think about ideas. And if you get good, some people, good comedians in particular, are really good at pauses, when to pause and then when to resume. And it's a key art. And one more thing is, so if you're thinking like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I could ever do this, well, just go to a bar and start talking to random people, or wherever you go where it doesn't mean anything, you won't see them again. Just start, and you'll be amazed when you ask people a question that they'll answer it. Like, oh, hey, how's it going? Hey, my name's Germ. I'm from, wherever the fuck you're from, hey, what is there to do around here? And then I'll always, a good thing is if you ever too, you can find commonalities in music and movies and TV, and that will break you in to have more difficult conversations. And it's a way to build rapport with people. Again, this stuff is not particularly complicated. It's not like you're figuring out a physics equation.
One of the things that bugs me a lot these days is when I see a YouTube video that says so-and-so destroys so-and-so.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I don't get it. Like, why? Do you get excited by humiliating somebody?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we do these videos in the prisons, if you really wanted to do something, you just throw these guys in there and just see what happens. But the goal, that's not the goal. The goal isn't to see bloodshed. The goal is to teach people how to have better conversations, right? The goal is to move the needle. And, I'm always amazed. There's this guy a few people do this, these quote unquote influencers. I hate that term, but there's this one guy, he's a black guy, and he goes around in Korea and Japan to another guy. And they harass people in streets and in supermarkets and shopping malls. And it's just, it is just insanely disrespectful. And maybe I live in a bubble. I don't know. Like maybe I really do live in a weird world. I just assume everybody knows how to fight. But I'm always amazed that like he doesn't run into some guy who's like really good at MMA, and the guy just kicks the shit out of his bodyguard first and dispenses with him in like a second and just breaks a few of his bones. Like I'm just amazed by that. But I do think that we have a lot of pernicious, just bad actors, and they're doing it for clicks. They're doing it for views. And almost universally, they're young men. Young women do a different kind of thing that are not provocative in the same way, or don't attempt to demean or humiliate, but attempt to draw attention to themselves.
Give me a nugget of wisdom.
About what? I have so much to give at 58. No, about what?
Gardening.
Gardening. Okay, well, that's one thing I have nothing. It reminds me of that movie in the 70s with Peter Sellers. Well, I'll give you a nugget of wisdom I gave you about parenting. I think is really important. I think teaching your kids a second language and making it so that they don't think about it. Teaching them how to defend themselves. Matt Thornton, I wrote the foreword to The Gift of Violence. He says, this is such an important nugget of wisdom. A goal should be to make good people dangerous to bad people. Cannot hope that the government is going to, I don't have to convince you of this, you're from South Africa, but you cannot just hope that the government is going to step in and protect you. You cannot hope that. So teach your kid some self-defense. Ask your kid difficult questions, but in a way that you don't take personally. Have them see you revise your beliefs. Have them see you in these conversations with other people that are engaging, and when people can have genuine differences of opinion and they don't lose their mind. So that's what I would say as a parent. Like, you need to make certain things normative. It's just normal that we do jiu-jitsu, and keep your kids out of the striking arts. They're very good for functional martial arts. They work. There's no question. Nobody's denying that, but they also give head trauma and head damage. So, and if they're hell-bent on doing it, tell them they need to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu before they do any striking arts. That will delay that problem for at least 10 to 12 years. But I think one of the things we're not talking about, I'm going to do an event when I go back to New York in a couple of months about young men and masculinity. And we're also not talking about what does it mean to be a young man in society. That's probably a second talk. But along with that, I think we're not talking about what does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a parent? What skills can you give to, we know that when there's an adult male in the home, Matt Thornton also writes about this in his book. When there's an adult male in the home, that's one of the main criminogenic factors. Sex, men are more likely, males are more likely. Age, certain ages, I think it's 16 and 26. I could be off on that. And whether or not there's an adult male in the home. So if you have issues with your girl, try to work them out until they're grown, the kids are grown. So that would be another little tidbit. Marriage is increasingly becoming a class-based thing as well. Oh, and if you want your kids to have a behavior, don't tell them to do the behavior. Have them watch you do the behavior. So if you want your kids to learn how to defend themselves, it's insufficient to put them in jiu-jitsu. It's good, but it's not sufficient. Even better would be for you to do jiu-jitsu and then they watch. And then so it's normative for them.
Okay, Peter, how can I follow you and your work?
I'm on X at Peter Boghossian, PeterBoghossian. I'm on YouTube. I have a Substack. I'm all over the place. So I have no plans to go to South Africa. If I would, it'd be I'd go to see you. Would have a good time.
Peter Boghossian, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Pleasure. Thanks, Germ.